Hey there, so today I got a really exciting one. I got some preview cards to show off. I wanted to first thank FFG for giving me the opportunity to show off some cards. Second, before we get started, please, if you can just thumbs up the video, subscribe to the channel. It really helps out a ton. Alright, so I'm going to dive right in. I want to say that I think both of these cards are competitive. They're probably both going to see some premier play. It's, as you know, if you've been watching my channel, I do focus on competitive gaming, and I wouldn't be saying that if I didn't think that there was a good shot that these cards were going to see some play. So let's go ahead and see the first one. It is Mercenary Gunship, and this is a gray card, and I just said competitive, so it's got to be something interesting going on here. It is a 2-cost space unit. It has the 3-2 stat line. It is an underworld vehicle fighter and has action for 4. Take control of this unit. Any player may use this ability. All right. So first off, 3-2 space unit, 4-2. This is a stat line that didn't even exist in set 1. We had the Green Squadron A-Wing was the closest thing to hitting for 3 at that cost. Now we've got a second one, right? We had Kylo's ship is a legendary and red villain, super exciting card. And here we got this neutral card with that exact same stat line, and any deck can play it, right? This has no color restriction. That's kind of wild. It's a very good stat line in this game, both for aggressive decks trying to push damage and for defensive decks, right? This is going to be pretty useful at taking out ships that are putting pressure against you. So what's the catch here? I mean, there is a negative ability on it, that 4-cost action that any player may take control of it. But you have to remember, you can also just take control of it back, and it's a very expensive ability, right? It's kind of like, it's almost like playing Traitorous. It's not super exciting to play Traitorous on 2 drops. It's also not super exciting to play Takedown on 2 drops, and this is the cost of Takedown. And it's not a permanent answer to the card, because both players could just end up trading resources. You'd be back where it started. It doesn't get exhausted or anything, so you'd still be able to attack with it if you steal it back. I just really don't think that downside is going to be super impactful. I think this is going to be a great early game play. It likely will be off the board by the time that action is relevant. Later in the game, maybe it's not a card you're going to want to jam out there when everyone's got 10 resources. But I think as far as an aggressive playstyle, this will be pushing damage, likely will demand an answer quicker than that 4-cost, especially since that 4-cost is not going to permanently answer it. But wait, there's a little more. Bam, Underworld. This is one of the most exciting new traits in the game right now. I think Underworld Synergy, specifically because of a few cards that I've listed here. McClunky is an absolute powerhouse of a card. We got Xanadu Blood, which can bounce this, getting it off the board. I think Cad Bane. This is super exciting in Cad Bane. I've been testing some Cad Bane. I was playing it with red and playing Kylo's TIE Fighter in that deck. And part of me was thinking, can I cut this card and just get another Underworld unit in here? I want to just use Cad Bane's ability every single turn. Well, this is the exact same stat line as that Kylo's ship. It has the Underworld. It's going to ping with Cad Bane's ability immediately. Pirated Starfighter is another interesting card here, right? Because when Mercenary Gunship's done doing its mercenary goodness, you can just bounce it back to your hand and not worry about that downside anymore. Same thing with McClunky, same thing with Xanadu Blood. These all bounce it back to your hand, so you might not even need to worry about that 4-cost action. All in all, I think this is just going to be a pretty cool card that every deck is going to have access to. It's definitely going to change a little bit of how you have to prepare for space aggression, but also give you tools to handle space aggression, right? It's just a cheap card that any deck can play. It might just be like a sideboard card against aggro if you need it, right? Because it's going to beat those A-Wings. It's going to beat those 2-3 ships in space. You're going to beat Kylo's TIE, right? It's just going to trade with all that stuff. So it's going to be a pretty useful tool in general. All right, so that's number 1. And number 2, coming right up, we've got Super Laser Technician. It's a 3. Wait, it's the wrong card. Bam! Spark of Hope. 2-cost green hero card with the innate trait. It says choose a unit in your discard pile. If it was defeated this phase, put it into play as a resource. So bam, hero now has its own ramp card that is not just green, right? It's not resupply, it's not the new bounty. This is a hero locked ramp card. It's hero's answer to Super Laser Technician. It costs 2, which is great. Now, it's not really a 2-drop because you're not going to have a unit defeated on the first turn unless some weird things happen, like you Han, ECL a Greedo, and then play this. It's probably not even that great of a line. But in general, that 2 cost is going to be very useful later in the game when you're going to be squeezing it into a turn where otherwise resupply would have been kind of taxing way too many of your resources. First of all, what I think this does in general is open up an archetype for heroes that didn't really exist in set 1, and that is hero ramp. Outside of a Han deck, who the Han leader has his own built-in ramp, hero ramp was not really an archetype you could build around because you only had access to resupply. It wasn't enough to kind of make your deck consistent. Not the same way that Villain Green had 3 resupply and 3 super laser tech and could very consistently be a ramp deck. I think this now is going to open that up as a legitimate strategy, not just as like an ancillary thing that your deck does. On top of that, the fact that this costs 2 is going to be pretty relevant on turns later in the game, such as 5 or 6 resource turns where you're trying to ramp into your leader. So like at 5 resources, you can play this, get to 6, that can deploy a bunch of leaders, right? There's Luke, there's the Boba Fett leader, the new one, the Hero Boba. At 7, like if you're going from 6 to 7, that now we're talking about Chewie, Hunter. So you're going to have more resources to play with than you used to when you were doing resupply into that, right? In the first example with Luke, if you resupplied on the 5 resource turn to get him out, you would only have 2 resources to play with, which would often mean 2 dead resources or a measly 2-drop. Having 3 resources on that turn after you ramp is actually pretty big. It gives you way more play into what you want to do. Same thing with the Chewie turn, right? You're just going to have more resources to play with, which is always great. And that's where the 2 cost on this is going to be a huge help. Now, it does require some setup, not a setup that I think is going to be too difficult to pull off in Hero Green decks. They play tons of units, tons of units. So I don't think it's going to be too tricky to get one of those to be defeated, but it is something to consider. And I think there's also going to be some really powerhouse plays you can do with this and resupply, because you can play them both on 5 resources and go to 7, and then get out your 7-cost leaders like Chewie or Hunter. Specifically those 2, right? Those are the 7-cost heroes leaders, and I think that's going to be a pretty big thing. I think it's something we see sometimes a Darth Vader deck do now with like super laser tech, being able to kind of double ramp into him on one turn. And I think with Spark of Hope, double ramping into a 7-cost leader alongside resupply might be a really powerful play. Other than that, there's Smuggle. You know, it's a little bit of an upside, right? If that unit that dies this turn has Smuggle, you're putting this into your resource row. You're putting that unit into your resource row. I think that's like a little tiny upside. I don't think that's going to be any major game changer, but it's nice that this, in some cases, can actually draw you a card in a sense by putting a Smuggle card into your resource row. But, you know, this is a big deal. I think heroes having a low-costed ramp card is going to just make them be able to build way more consistent ramp decks. It's going to be an archetype enabler. Whether or not that archetype will be on par in power level to like the villain ramp stuff, we'll have to wait and see. All right. Thanks again for watching. Thanks again at FFG for giving me the opportunity to preview these cards. Once again, if you don't mind, subscribe to the channel, like the video, it means a lot. And until next time, take care.